this episode, we will be discussing our goals for creating this podcast, as well as diving into our journeys navigating the FGLI experience and how all of these factors led up to the creation of this podcast. Keep on listening as we kick off our podcast with a fun and casual discussion about what it means to be FGLI. Hopefully, this will give a taste for what's to come in our future episodes. Hello, my name is Peter.
And my name's Khaliun.
And this is the FGLI podcast.
Welcome to our first episode. So, Peter and I would kind of like to give you guys a background on the behind the scenes of creating this podcast, our motivations, and what it's going to look like going forward.
Yeah, and we'll also talk a little bit about our own journeys and how we navigated the FGLI community during our time at Penn. But first, Khaliun, would you like to start talking about your experience, how you transitioned from high school over to Penn, and how you've just begun to explore everything at Penn so far?
Yeah, so starting back at the beginning, I think I had a unique privilege, I'd say, as a FGLI student, in that my older brother went to university at the state school near us, and my cousin had gone into and attended USC. So for me, that kind of glass ceiling of can I even do this was always broken. And going forward, my cousin had gone to USC via Questbridge, and she had kind of introduced that opportunity to me, like, this is this program, you have to apply for it, do it right now, get into the college prep scholars, do the match, everything. And I think that way it really helped me be on top of everything. You know, when I was actually applying to school, I started my Common App application before you were supposed to, and it resets every August or something. No. So all my letters of recommendation were gone. Luckily I saved my essays elsewhere, and it was just such a FGLI moment, you know? It was so typical. And so it was kind of going through my high school. I went to a trailer park high school. It was one long trailer, another long trailer, and the only actual building we had was where we ate lunch. I didn't have any classrooms there. And I want to say my graduating class was 50 kids, but we had a partnership with the local university. So my junior and senior years, I was taking college classes. I'd kind of gotten used to this, the faster pace, the communicating with professors and things like that. So when I look back at my high school experience, even though it was from kind of a quirky, peculiar way, and kind of going to this really small school, I never felt held back, which when I've talked to other FGLI students, I think it's easy to try to take your background and apply it on everyone else you meet, because you're like, oh, we have this common identity. But, you know, talking to people and realizing how different their experiences were, it's been really eye-opening, and it's just awesome that, you know, people feel comfortable enough to talk about it, and that honestly, they ended up at Penn, you know, despite all these barriers and hardships. So I'm curious about your experience, Peter. I know your freshman year was COVID, and would your high school senior year also been online?
Yeah, so senior year of high school for me during the spring, that was pretty much the start of COVID, which meant that later that fall we would go to college during pretty much the height of COVID. So all of our courses were virtual for the fall semester, and it was pretty difficult trying to balance new college level courses while finding clubs, and at the same time just being isolated from everyone else in your classes or the clubs that you find, and not really having access to the other on-campus, in-person resources that Penn normally offers. And eventually for me, it became kind of a toxic cycle of just going to lecture on Zoom and then trying to do the homework, not really understanding, trying to go to TA office hours, and still not really understanding, but it was just a rinse and repeat over and over again. And at that time, I didn't even know if any of my classmates existed, because we just saw them on Zoom, and that was pretty much it. And college for me was just almost a continuation of high school when it went virtual. So it was all just from the comfort, or I guess at the same time loneliness of my own bedroom. But yeah, I guess to go in a little bit more about what my high school experience was like and how I kind of approached the college application process. Some of my cousins did go to college, but I wasn't super close to them, so I wasn't able to really ask them like any questions. I couldn't ask my parents any questions because they hadn't gone to college, obviously. And I think I got pretty lucky during high school, as I had a really good guidance counselor, and she would pretty much answer all of my questions that I would bring her. I would go to her office pretty much every day during lunch. During freshman year, when I was trying to figure out what courses to take, because at least the one thing my parents would tell me was to always go to my guidance counselor and just ask as many questions as possible and kind of work my way from there. But basically, what I mean by getting lucky was that I learned about QuestBridge and their college prep application about 2 weeks before the deadline. And I didn't really know what it was. I just got a random email one day and thought it was a scam. But I went to my guidance counselor and she was like, oh, yeah, this is a thing that kind of prepares you for the college application process later in the fall. And then she thought it was a good opportunity for me to just try it. So because of that, I wrote a couple of essays pretty quickly, had my guidance counselor look over them. And after that, that was when I started learning more about QuestBridge, learning more about what it means to apply to college, how to choose a good college, etc. And in the fall, I would do the match and then would match to Penn through QuestBridge. But yeah, it wasn't until my spring semester of freshman year when I really learned more about the FGLI experience and had my first interactions with the FGLI community at Penn, mainly because the fall semester, it was a lot of me getting used to the course load, navigating everything, just learning everything that first years normally learn when they first step foot into college. But during the spring semester, I started attending these FGLI fireside chats that were hosted by the GIC. And they had alumni who were FGLI that would come on, give their advice, answer any questions that first-gen low-income students would have. And from there, I started talking to some more people. I started talking to Toyce Holmes, who is the previous FGLI coordinator at the GIC. And she was the person who slowly started to introduce me to all of these different resources, to Penn First, to Penn First Plus, to the GIC in general. And from there, she connected me to more people, and then I slowly learned more about what it meant to be FGLI at Penn, while also getting a lot of advice from these different mentors that I was having. But yeah, Khaliun, I wanted to ask you how you first started to interact with the FGLI community and how you started to navigate Penn as a FGLI student.
Yeah, FGLI is really interesting at Penn because while it's like empowering identity in some points, it's also kind of taboo. When you just randomly meet someone, you're having this conversation and it'll be just like a tiny thing that'll tip you off. Now often I think it'd be the Penn First Plus like free sweatshirts they give out, where like say first gen or someone will just kind of mention that and all of a sudden like you click on a separate level where like obviously like if you're Asian American, it's easy like to visibly see that and connect with that connection, but it's a bit taboo. You don't really want to mention those things. I want to say I was a bystander in the FGLI community for my freshman year. I had friends who were FGLI. I was even part of a FGLI group, Penn First. But, we didn't hold too many events, and it wasn't like I was out there advocating or anything. I was just trying to keep afloat. And then at the beginning of my sophomore year, due to like a huge board transition, I found myself in kind of like the top position of Penn First. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay, I need to step up because if I don't, this club's going to go extinct. And like it was kind of that pressure. But also alongside it, it was like an amazing board that happened to be turned over, joined that year too. And then this year especially, that put in the work and seeing like your events pay off. Because I would say my sophomore year, the events happened. I wouldn't say they quite paid off. Right. We had them happen, like the attendance was okay. But really putting that work in and like talking to these sources, the GIC and Penn First Plus, just kind of get some transparency on funding and things. And having events this year where like we run out of boba, we don't have seats left. Like we have an event that goes from 2 to 4 and Penn First Plus has to kick us out at 5 because they close at 5. It's crazy to see and see it correlate with hard work because very rarely do you see such a clear correlation. And I think it all comes down to, obviously, like I said before, student hard work and dedication, but also the dedication of the people like at Penn First Plus, who like this year, when we kind of lost our main funding source, immediately stepped in and was like, we're not letting these FGLI groups go extinct. They're a big part of the community, and in that part, a big part of Penn.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like it just is great to see the community kind of like healing, if that makes sense, from like going online and just all the pressure from like housing and financial aid to like we can all still come together and like paint together and have a fun time and get to know new people.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that really illustrates one of the main reasons why we created this podcast, as like we've seen over COVID, as older students begin to graduate and they weren't able to pass down all of their really helpful information and advice to the younger students, there's kind of a disconnect and a loss of information, which is one of the reasons why we started this podcast, to create a record of all of this great advice, all of these stories that would otherwise be lost and unheard, and kind of bring them to light so that incoming students or current students or maybe students that already graduated but weren't able to hear all of this great advice would now be able to really like listen to these stories and connect with them. And another goal of this podcast is to really capture the diverse perspectives that make up the FGLI experience by talking to a wide range of people, whether they be incoming first years or graduating seniors, or even professionals just already in the height of their careers. We just want to really capture all of the different stories and narratives that make up the experience, just to show that we're not really alone in our experience. And even though all of us have our own unique circumstances growing up and unique trajectories, our experiences are shared in some way or another by others. And hopefully this should make the FGLI experience a little less lonely and hopefully promote more discourse around the challenges that FGLI students experience.
Yeah, and that was how Peter presented this podcast to me, and that was the way I like immediately got hooked onto it, because I saw that again like firsthand with Penn First when Victoria Garcia left as a senior, and it's like I don't know how to do anything, and I think Penn First would have gone extinct if she hadn't kind of like had to like come back and tell me like, okay, well you got to do this, you got to do that, this is who you talk to, and from there like kind of building it up. And I think that's something that like kind of still scares me to this day with all the work I kind of put into Penn First. I'm so terrified to like take a step back and see the group crumble in that kind of way. But I think a part of it is being prepared for it in some small part. I think with FGLI organizations, since they're so student-led, it's kind of hard to step back from a leadership position, either from like necessity or, to be honest, like it's nice to be in a leadership position for some people. Like the people who naturally find themselves in it, they probably like it. And I think it's important to just kind of like, this is off tangent a little bit, but like to like be able to take a step back and like let your freshmen take on these big events and like let them fail sometimes. Like maybe they'll miss a meeting, that's okay, because in the long run it'll save your group. Yeah, so I actually have a little fun question. We're talking about all these resource sharing. What do you think is like a minor resource that people don't know about? You know, I remember when you told me about P1P, like funding your MCAT and stuff. I was like, what? That's a thing?
Wait, yeah.
I was so shocked about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that the P1P thing that you mentioned is called the Career Launch Fund, where basically P1P, if you apply for something that helps you in your professional career, whether it be flying to an interview, getting close for an interview, job interview, or in my case, it was preparing for the MCAT for med school applications, they'll give you some of money to help you complete those steps. So basically for me, for the MCAT, Penn First Plus funded a whole set of Kaplan textbooks for the MCAT, so I was able to use those to study, and they also helped pay for my MCAT after getting 50% off from the AAMC fee waiver. But I feel like besides like their newsletter, if you're not signed up for that, you wouldn't really know about the Penn First Plus Career Launch Fund. So I would really highly recommend checking that out. And if you are pre-med or pre-law and you need maybe your grad school exams funded, or if you're trying to find an internship or trying to go to a job interview, I would check that out, because there's just money sitting there waiting for you. But yeah, what about you, Khaliun?
Yeah, I think mine's more advice, and it might be toxic, but like professors are hard to get through to email. I just go to their office, and like I think that's something that like a lot of like the older generation says. You know, like what they'll say like oh, just go to the store and ask for a job and stuff. But I think that's one of the things that's really helpful. And like if their office door is closed, then okay, just send them another email. But like a lot of the times, like the professors' doors are like half open, and that's actually how like got like my first step into research. I was like, this professor seems cool. They're not really responding to my email. Let me just like pop my head in and be like, hey, I'm really interested in this. And it all worked out really well. And like especially for my advisor, he's pretty slow to respond to emails. And again, like I'm just in the chemistry building a lot. So I have a question, I'll just like pop my head in and be like, hey, how do I do this? And I think it kind of opens up the door for a more personal relationship, which like in the long run, if you're thinking about in the Penn way, is a great way to get like letters of recommendation and stuff like that. But also these like better conversations, you know, with that first professor I was talking about, we talked about how it's kind of difficult to be at Penn. Yeah. And I told her about like my kind of experience as a first generation student, and she was really welcoming to it and really warm. And I didn't notice it at the time. I went back, I have her as a professor right now, and I kind of went back to her office hours, you know, just like as a student. And she was telling me, she's like, yeah, you just seem so much more happier now. Then you kind of like have this step in. It's like, I've seen how much you've grown, even just like in this short span of like when I met her during sophomore spring and then junior fall. And it was really heartwarming. We had like a cute little side hug. And just to think like that experience might have not ever happened if I just let an email sit and didn't kind of like went out of my comfort zone and like knocked on her office door and created like that face-to-face, person-to-person relationship.
Yeah, that's great advice. I feel like when I was also a first year, I didn't really know that I could just walk into a professor's office and just start having a conversation with them. But yeah. I also realized that we never introduced ourselves. We went like all this way without.
Yeah, you guys have no idea who we are.
Like, no one even knows who we are.
No.
We just started like rambling about just like the Figley experience. Like, we're just the creators of this podcast.
We're just like faceless gods in this podcast.
I guess if we want to do a quick introduction of ourselves, pretty much 20 minutes into the episode. My name is Peter. I'm a senior studying neuroscience in the college, and a couple of things that I'm involved in are Penn Lions, which is a super, super cool lion dancing troupe at Penn. I'm also part of Penn First Plus's mentorship program for first years, and besides that, I do other stuff too, like research. But yeah, how about you?
My name's Khaliun. I'm a junior in the college studying biochemistry. I'm involved with, as you talked about, Penn First. I'm the finance VP for PUCS, the Penn Undergraduate Chemical Society, and I'm also part of AOE and All STEM sorority. Also very fun, a little plug. And also the fun stuff like research.
Nice. But yeah, before we end this episode, I also wanted to go over what to get super excited for as we release our upcoming episodes and discuss some of our main goals for this podcast just one more time. Our first main pillar of our podcast is to have interviews with alumni just to listen to their advice, their narratives as they first went to college, how they navigated college, and how they navigate their life post-grad with career and just everything else. And basically how the Figley experience extends from basically high school throughout college and well into your career post-grad. We'll discuss a lot of different topics such as navigating finances, finding a major, figuring out what to do, just careers, maybe mental health, a bit of imposter syndrome, But a bunch of very interesting and important topics that aren't discussed enough, and we hope to bring these topics to light as we talk to more alumni. We also hope to talk to current students as well, just to get a current, on-the-ground perspective of the current challenges that FGLI students are experiencing here at Penn, but also in general.
The third thing we want to focus on is resource sharing, as we got into. It's just another thing where we feel like it's lost when current students graduate. And again, it's something where it's not quite easy to begin the conversation about unless you're specifically asking someone who may have that information that you need this advice on it. So the FGLI podcast kind of opens up the door of this is where all the resources at. And also focusing on the sociological theories behind the FGLI podcast, applying it with our experiences and those we interview. And the main focus with that is that we're validating these experiences with this scientific background, knowing that this is something real, this is something that affects us. And the podcast is like a real life focus and practice of these theories. And there is much, much more to come.
Yeah, so much more.
Yep. By the time you're listening to this, hopefully you'll have a good couple episodes to stream. And just to make sure, follow us on our Instagram and join our Discord to keep updated with us. But yeah, we have a lot in store, and we hope you're ready for it. It sounds like a threat.
But yeah, if you are interested in listening to our future episodes, you can find us on Spotify and Google Podcasts, as well as maybe Apple Podcasts if we get verified, at the FGLI Podcast. And check out our Discord, where we can hopefully have more discussion about each episode after it drops. And also, you can meet other very cool people who are also FGLI. But yeah. In case the goal of the Discord was unclear, we're hoping on creating a Discord just to have more discussion after each episode drops. If people are really interested in learning more, we can also have questions that people can ask on the Discord that we can bring up to our guest. So the Discord can be a really cool place where discourse can happen. And yeah, we'll have a bunch of different channels where you can also meet other FGLI students and hopefully connect a lot more. But yeah, bye-bye.
Catch you later, alligators.
Bye.